Most scammers disappear the moment they get the money. They change their burner phones, clear their crypto wallets, and move on to the next victim. But the man who stole my grandmother's $2 million life savings, a man named Victor Vance, made one fatal mistake. He stayed in the same city to flaunt his wealth. He thought my grandma was just a confused old woman with no one to protect her. He didn't realize her grandson is a forensic data analyst who specializes in tracking dark web money laundering. I didn't call the police. I didn't file a report. I knew the law would take years and he'd hide the money before they even opened a case. Instead, I spent 12 months creating a fake identity as a multi-millionaire real estate mogul from Dubai. I became his biggest client. I invited him into my world, fed his ego, and convinced him to put every cent he ever stole into a can't-lose investment that didn't exist. This is a 4,000-word autopsy of a master scammer's total annihilation. I didn't just want the money back. I wanted to watch the moment he realized he had been played by the very person he thought he had destroyed. Sit down because the long game is about to begin. My grandmother, Evelyn, was the kindest person I ever knew. She worked as a nurse for 40 years and saved every penny. When my grandfather passed, she was left with a $2 million nest egg. She wasn't greedy. She just wanted to leave something for her grandkids. Then came Victor Vance. Victor was a financial advisor who specialized in senior wealth management. He was charming. He wore bespoke suits, and he had a way of making you feel like your money was safer with him than in a vault. He spent 6 months grooming Evelyn, bringing her flowers, taking her to lunch, and listening to her stories. By the time he asked her to move her funds into a high-yield private equity fund, she trusted him like a son. I was working in Singapore at the time. When I came back for Christmas, I found Evelyn living in a state of quiet panic. She hadn't received a statement in 3 months. Victor wasn't returning her calls. When I looked at the contracts he had given her, my blood turned to ice. They were sophisticated forgeries. The equity fund was a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. That had been dissolved 2 weeks after her wire transfer. Victor Vance hadn't invested her money. He had used it to buy a penthouse in the city and a fleet of Italian sports cars. He had stolen 40 years of her labor in 40 minutes. Evelyn was devastated. She felt ashamed. She told me, "Alex, don't hate him, just let it go." But I couldn't let it go. I went to the police and they gave me the standard line. It's a complex white-collar crime. It'll take years to investigate. I knew Victor would have the money laundered through art or offshore accounts by then. I realized that if I wanted justice, I had to be the one to deliver it. I spent the next 3 months studying Victor. I watched him at the high-end bars he frequented. I learned his tell. He was obsessed with status. He didn't just want money. He wanted to be seen as a big player in the international market. He was a shark who loved the smell of blood. So I decided to give him a whale. I created Kassim Al-Fayed, a fictitious billionaire, heir looking to move $50 million into the local real estate market to clean it. I rented a high-end office, hired a temporary staff of actors, and bought a used Lamborghini to park out front. I was ready to go fishing, and Victor Vance was exactly the kind of hungry fish I was looking for. The first meeting happened at the Ambassador Club, an exclusive lounge where you need a $10,000 membership just to walk through the door. I made sure Victor saw me. I made sure he saw the Kassim persona, the expensive watch, the security detail, the casual way I ordered a $5,000 bottle of wine and barely touched it. I waited for him to approach me. Sharks can't help themselves when they see that kind of meat. He walked over with a practiced smile, held out his hand, and said, "I don't think we've met. I'm Victor Vance, Private Wealth Management." I looked him up and down with bored indifference and said, "Kassim." I'm looking for a local partner, but I've been disappointed so far. Everyone in this city feels small. That was the hook. For the next 4 months, I played the long groom. I let Victor take me to dinner. I let him pitch me on his smaller schemes. I even gave him $50,000 to invest money I had saved from my own salary and told him if he could double it in a month. I'd consider him for my global fund, of course. Victor doubled it using my grandmother's own stolen money, desperate to prove he was a genius. He thought he was playing me. He thought I was a rich, spoiled brat who didn't understand the value of money. He started calling me brother. He started telling me his secrets. He bragged about how he had liquidated a few senior accounts to fund his current lifestyle. He actually laughed about my grandmother. He didn't name her, but he described her as the easiest mark of his career. I sat there, smiling, nodding, and sipping my drink, while internally I was imagining the look on his face when I stripped the skin off his back. The climax of the grooming phase came when I told Victor about the Oasis project. I told him I was building a private island resort and that I needed a final $10 million to close the land deal. I told him that anyone who invested in this phase would get a 500% return within 6 months. But I added with a sigh, I only work with people who put their own skin in the game. I don't want your client's money, Victor. I want your money. If you can't put up $2 million of your own cash, you aren't a partner. You're just an employee. Victor's eyes lit up. This was his dream, the one big score that would make him a billionaire. He had exactly $2.1 million in his personal hideaway account, the exact amount he had stolen from Evelyn, plus interest. He hesitated for a week. I played hard to get. I told him I was moving the deal to a group in Miami. He panicked. He called me at 2 a.m., panting, and said, Kassim, wait. I'm in. Every cent. I'm moving it to the escrow account tonight. The escrow account Victor sent the money to was a beauty of digital engineering. It looked like a standard bank portal, but it was actually a dead-end wallet I had built. The moment the $2.1 million hit the account, my automated scripts distributed it into 50 different sub-accounts, all of which were legally tied back to my grandmother's original stolen funds. I didn't steal his money. I recovered it. But Victor didn't know that yet. To him, the screen showed a pending confirmation for the Oasis project. I told him we had to celebrate. I invited him to my private yacht, which was actually a charter. I had rented for the night using the $50,000 profit he had given me earlier. The night was perfect. The city skyline was glittering, the champagne was flowing, and Victor was on top of the world. He was talking about buying a private jet. He was talking about leaving this small-time city forever. I waited until we were 5 miles offshore. I turned off the music. I sat down across from him and dropped the Kassim accent. I spoke in my normal voice, the voice of Evelyn's grandson. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a photo of my grandmother. I placed it on the table between us. Victor looked at the photo, then at me. You could see the gears turning in his head. The color drained from his face until he looked like a marble statue. Who are you? He stammered. I told him. I told him exactly who I was. I told him about the year I spent tracking his every move. I told him that the $2.1 million he had just wired was already back in my grandmother's bank account. I told him that the Oasis project was a PowerPoint presentation I made on a Sunday afternoon. I showed him my laptop screen, which displayed his bank balance, $0. I had also filed automatic fraud alert with his other clients using the evidence I gathered during our dinners. While we were on this boat, his other victims were receiving emails with proof of his embezzlement. His office was likely being raided by the FBI at that very moment. Victor tried to stand up, tried to lung at me, but my security detail, who were actually off-duty police officers. I had hired to witness the confession pinned him to the deck that Victor began to cry. Not out of remorse, but out of the sheer shock of losing his status. He begged me for a small cut so he could get out of the country. I laughed. I told him, "Victor, you said my grandma was your easiest mark. I think you were wrong. You were mine." I signaled the captain to head back to the pier. But we weren't going back to the Ambassador Club. We were going to the downtown police precinct, where the white-collar crime unit was waiting with a warrant I had spent months helping them build. Victor Vance, the man who thought he was a shark, was about to find out what happens when a whale decides to crush you. The aftermath was a symphony of justice. Victor was arrested the moment we hit the dock. Because I had recorded every dinner, every brag, and every confession using a high-fidelity pen recorder, the prosecution had an open and shut case. They didn't even need the offshore data. Victor's friends, the people he had bought with Evelyn's money, turned on him in an instant. They were more than happy to testify against him to save their own reputations. His penthouse was seized and sold at auction. His cars were repossessed. The man who lived for status was now wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, sitting in a cell with 3 other men who didn't care about his wealth management skills. I went to my grandmother's house the following Sunday. I didn't tell her the whole story. I didn't want her to know her grandson had spent a year playing a dangerous game with a criminal. I just told her that the authorities had recovered her funds. I showed her the bank statement, $2.1 million. She cried for an hour. She told me I knew Victor was a good man deep down. I knew he'd do the right thing. I didn't correct her. Let her believe in the goodness of the world. It's what makes her Evelyn. I took the extra $100,000, the money I had recovered from Victor's own personal savings, and donated it to a foundation that helps elderly victims of financial abuse. As for me, I kept the Kassim watch. It sits on my desk as a reminder that the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a gun or a virus. It's a person who is willing to wait. Victor wanted to move fast. I was willing to move slow. He wanted to be a shark. I was the ocean. I moved back to my job, but I'm different now. I realized that the law is a tool, but justice is a craft. You have to build it with your own hands. Sometimes you have to become the person you hate just long enough to destroy them. Victor is serving 15 years now. He'll be 70 when he gets out, the same age Evelyn was when he robbed her. I hope he spends every day of those 15 years thinking about the Oasis project. I hope he thinks about the billionaire heir who didn't exist. And most of all, I hope he realizes that Evelyn wasn't his easiest mark. She was his last.